It is the dawn of the 41st millennium. More than 8 centuries have passed since Abaddon's last Black Crusade. Generations of Imperial citizens have come and gone without ever facing the dreaded Warmaster. Innumerable battles have been won and lost, with no sighting of the great despoiler of worlds. For the average Dreg of Imperial society, the name Abaddon is but a distant threat, spoken of by overzealous preachers and maddened historians. Yet in the year 142 of the 41st millennium, the hammer would fall once again. This time the Black Legion's wrath would be directed at the Gothic sector. The 12th Black Crusade would crash against Imperial defences with a savagery that dwarfed all previous incursions. The Gothic War was about to begin. After millennia of toil and effort, Abaddon's end goal was fast approaching. The Imperium had been weakened through centuries of ceaseless attrition and internal strife. More importantly, the veil between the warp and the material world had been severely weakened through Abaddon's actions. Many Necron pylons lay in ruin, and the Immaterium still rang with the screams of the Black Legion's many victims. Soon enough, the thin walls between reality and the abominations of the warp would split, and the galaxy would be sundered in two. Nevertheless, more work needed to be done before this final glorious hour. Abaddon had made good use of his centuries-long hiatus. Through scrupulous divination and demonic rituals, he had laid out his plans to land his penultimate blow against the Imperium of Man. In this, he was well counselled by a trio of dark figures. For starters, Abaddon could rely on the skills of his old companion, the sorcerer Iskander Khayon. A founding member of the Black Legion and the Ezekarian, Iskander had been crucial in Ezekiel's rise to power. Yet the Warmaster was also advised by the infamous Zarafiston. Formerly a sorcerer of the Thousand Suns, Zarafiston had been blessed by Tzeentch himself with an unparalleled grasp of the future. He, in turn, had brought the seer Moriana back to the fold. This old crone was a figure of great mystery and obvious power. Her advice had been essential in locating the demon blade Drach'nyen during the First Black Crusade. It was certainly no hyperbole to claim that the 12th Black Crusade was the product of one of the greatest intelligence networks mankind had ever produced. Despite their dark origins, only the fabled Farseers of the Eldar could have hoped to match such terrifying powers of divination. Unsurprisingly, Abaddon's cabal completed their task with enviable efficiency. The clarity of their visions allowed the Warmaster to identify clear targets and devise a precise strategy to attain his goals. The ultimate objective of the 12th Black Crusade, as set by Ezekiel's advisors, would be the capture of the Blackstone fortresses. Also known as the Talismans of Vol, the Blackstone fortresses were massive starships. Indeed, their size was more akin to a space station like the Phalanx, rather than a vessel. They had been created aeons ago by the Eldar during the War in Heaven. Their initial aim had been to curb the expansion of the Necrontyr race and their Catan overlords. After the fall of the Eldar Empire, however, they had been abandoned by their creators. Thousands of years later, Imperial explorers had chanced upon 6 of these awesome weapons of war around the Gothic sector. Despite their unquestionable alien origins, the Imperials had set aside their usual xenophobia and garrisoned the Blackstone fortresses. Clearly, even their narrow-mindedness could recognize the potential of the Talismans of Vol. Unfortunately, humanity's golden age of technology had long since passed. The many tech priests called upon to cleanse and repair the space stations only managed to understand and unlock a fraction of their power. The fortresses had been built in a day and age when the Eldar fought against godlike beings of immeasurable power. The impossible destruction and havoc of the War in Heaven made galaxy-wide conflicts like the Great Crusade or the Horus Heresy seem like petty skirmishes by comparison. As such, the Talismans of Vol packed an arsenal of world-ending weaponry. Capable of breaching the gap between real space and the warp, they were able to pulverize planets with a single shot. Furthermore, they were also connected to the Eldar webway, allowing them to act as communication and logistics hubs. If need be, entire fleets could materialize through the gargantuan webway portals of each Blackstone fortress. Yet, like an orc rummaging through a mighty titan, humanity's grasp of the Talismans of Vol was rudimentary at best. The best the Loyalists could do was to use the Blackstone fortresses as mobile defense stations to secure the Gothic sector. The Adeptus Mechanicus thus retrofitted the warships with the best weaponry, life support systems, and hangar bays they had at their disposal. Despite the undeniable brilliance of the priesthood of Mars, however, their efforts were but a sad joke compared to the might of the Eldar at their peak. It was those space stations that Abaddon meant to secure for himself. His advisors had sworn that through their capture, the Talismans of Vol would allow the War Master to finally deliver a lethal blow to the Imperium. Ever since those dark days, however, rumours and whispers have circulated surrounding Abaddon's motivations. It has been alleged, though never proven, that Abaddon's seers had been manipulated. If rumours were to be believed, the mighty Catan, known as the Deceiver, was actually the one responsible for directing Abaddon towards the Blackstone fortresses. Understanding the whims of this creature is as futile as trying to guess the mind of Tzeentch or Kagorek. However, one can surmise that the Catan wished to see the destruction of weapons created specifically to vanquish creatures such as he. Ultimately, it mattered little where the information came from. Abaddon's war plans were set. The Talismans of Vol, however, were semi-sentient constructs of immense power. Furthermore, as artifacts of a highly psychic race with a deep hatred of chaos, they were bound to resist Abaddon's will. The War Master needed to ensure he could break them in like a stallion. It was Moriana who brought him the solution. On the worlds of Purgatory and Orn's world lay two dangerous Xenos artifacts, the Hand of Darkness and the Eye of Night. Through their power, Ezekiel could hope to dominate the Talismans of Vol. Abaddon's plans were clear: secure the Hand of Darkness on Purgatory, then secure the Eye of Night on Orn's world, and finally conquer the Blackstone fortresses in the Gothic sector. The Gothic War was about to begin. Abaddon began his attack by poking and prodding at his enemy's defences. His initial strikes were measured, discreet, and limited. To the defenders, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just isolated cases of raiding from the Eye of Terror. There was certainly nothing to indicate that a massive invasion was brewing. In the year 139 of the 41st millennium, the first official casualties were reported. A small Imperial frigate on a routine patrol mission across the Gothic sector received a distress signal from the unimportant Ark station. This low-priority call was only answered 4 months later, whereupon the crew and garrison of the unhappy outpost were discovered to have been butchered and mutilated. An inquisitorial team, led by Inquisitor Horst, was sent to investigate. Though the attack was clearly the work of the archenemy, there was little left for Horst to uncover. The raiders had been thorough, and 4 months of decomposition had made the Inquisitor's task all but impossible. A little over a year later, more seemingly isolated attacks were reported. An alarming number of Imperial vessels went silent, one by one. These were no merchant vessels or supply craft, but ships of war in their own right, including a mighty Emperor-class battleship. Their disappearance was certainly cause for concern. The missing vessels were eventually discovered by a patrol in the Athena sector, where they were found to be drifting aimlessly. Boarding parties were immediately dispatched. The terrified rescue parties clutched at their lasguns as they made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of each vessel. Not a single sound could be heard. Eventually, the crews of the battleships were located. They had been dead for days, and clear evidence of unnatural disease clung around them. What fate befell the rescue parties exposed to such corruption has seemingly been sealed by the Inquisition. Inquisitor Horst immediately and accurately suspected the involvement of the followers of Nurgle. His suspicions were confirmed when a mighty Death Guard warship, known as the Plague Claw, was spotted reaving in the nearby area. This vessel was known to be a part of the fleet of Typhus, one of the Plague Father's greatest servants. A few days later, the Death Guard sacked the hive world of Morgengast, spreading plague and disease throughout the world. Saving the planet was beyond the Imperium's capabilities, and severe quarantine measures had to be taken to ensure the unholy plagues of Nurgle spread no further. This last act of aggression finally convinced Horst of the terrifying truth. These were no random incidents, but the prelude of a Black Crusade. At once, the Cadian Gate was placed on high alert. Upon receiving information from the Inquisition, Lord Admiral Cornelius von Ravensburg sent word to mobilize the full might of Battlefleet Gothic. No matter what the warp threw at them, the Imperial Navy would be there to meet them with Faith, Steel, and Lance batteries. The call to arms was not given a moment too soon. As Battlefleet Gothic geared up for total war, chaos sightings increased dramatically. A large heretic fleet was spotted and engaged near the Naxos system, while flotillas were spread across the Gothic sector to screen for the rest of Abaddon's forces. However, the official start of the 12th Black Crusade would take place on the cardinal world of Lorentics, the home of the sacred bell of Saint Gestahl. The world of Saint Gestahl had been raided by Abaddon millennia ago during the 3rd Black Crusade. The despoiler had desecrated the remains of the Imperial saint, foiling a dangerous prophecy. Yet the bell had survived the massacre of its native world. What power had resided within the bones of the dead saint must have been transferred into this holy artifact, for it suddenly began ringing on its own. Every man who heard its toll knew at once it heralded death and torment. Not long after the last, slow, tortured ring had echoed out, the Black Legion invaded the world. In the butchery that followed, the bell was forever lost to the Imperium. Though Abaddon was not the one who claimed it. Reports from what few survivors remained were mangled and confused. Yet, the Inquisition managed to corroborate several independent testimonies, all of which claimed the same thing. In the midst of the carnage, when all seemed lost, a skeletal figure had appeared in a flash of green light. Anyone who stood in his way was cut down mercilessly, from mere mortals to powerful Chaos Astartes. The skeletal figure made its way to the bell and laid a hand on the relic, before disappearing with the artifact as quickly as it had appeared. The loss of Lorentics sent shockwaves across the Gothic sector. The Guard and Navy may have been ready to face the heretics like their ancestors before them, but the same could not be said of the hundreds of billions of civilians. At once, thousands of rebellions and warp storms erupted across the sector, destabilizing von Ravensburg's efforts to coordinate a response. Secret chaos cults rose from the shadows and the undercities, reveling in their newfound freedom. Millions of desperate men and women were recruited or coerced into their ranks. Now that the eye was open, the hour had come to shed blood in the name of the dark gods. In response to these vile heretics, religious mania and mass hysteria ran rampant across the Imperial worlds. Flagellant cults rose everywhere and threw themselves against the heretics. The populations of the Gothic sector were tearing themselves to pieces, without a single shot from Abaddon himself. The Adeptus Arbites and local enforcers were quickly overwhelmed by the scale of the violence. To make matters worse, clear evidence of sabotage was uncovered by the Ordo Hereticus when several Imperial battleships were destroyed in otherwise secure dockyards. The Gothic sector was in the grips of panic and utter chaos, and with every guard squad or Imperial vessel tied down to deal with the uprisings, Abaddon's job was made easier. Taking advantage of his enemy's plight, the War Master launched 2 massive raids against the world of Purgatory and Orn's world in order to claim the Hand of Darkness and the Eye of Night. Purgatory was attacked and quickly taken by the Night Lords. Their invasion was carried out with their customary brutality and sadism. By the time they were finished, the Hand of Darkness had been claimed, along with hundreds of thousands of slaves. Orn's world, however, had better luck. A rattling world, the planet was also home to an Imperial Guard recruiting regiment. The brave guardsmen, seconded by rattling snipers fighting as auxiliary forces, quickly drove back the initial Chaos invasion. This daring martial feat scored an early and much-needed Imperial victory. Unfortunately for the Rattlings, the Black Legion returned en masse less than a month later. The local population was unable to repeat their success. The hapless abhumans were slaughtered mercilessly, and Abaddon finally claimed the Eye of Night. The War Master had completed the first 2 stages of his plan. Now the final hurdle remained. It was time to conquer the Blackstone fortresses themselves. Around the year 140, a new catastrophe befell the Imperium. The seemingly random slaughter at the Ark's station finally bore fruit for the War Master. A gap was created near its location, where the massive Chaos warship, known as Planet Killer, entered real space. As its name implied, this awesome vessel was capable of leveling entire planets with its monstrous armaments. At the same time as it made its appearance in the Gothic War, massive heretical fleets materialized to escort it from the Eye of Terror. 3 years after hostilities had begun, it was obvious to all that this promised to be the greatest and deadliest Black Crusade so far. Yet for now, Battlefleet Gothic and the Guard held the line as they had done for 10,000 years. Unfortunately for the brave warriors of the God Emperor of Mankind, the unimaginable bloodletting Abaddon had unleashed upon the sector finally manifested itself. Massive warp storms, reminiscent of the ruin storm of the Horus Heresy, broke out. Normally random in nature, it was obvious to Imperial strategists that these storms were driven by a dark will. In a disastrous twist, they completely isolated the Gothic sector from the rest of the Imperium. Admiral Ravensburg was now completely alone, locked in a deathmatch with the chosen champion of the Chaos Gods. Yet amidst the chaos and confusion, the Lord Admiral was everywhere. Eschewing rest and sleep, he coordinated the war effort with a skill seldom seen among mortal warriors. During those days of utter despair, he stood as a beacon of hope and martial pride. His deeds during the Gothic War would carve a legend that even Adeptus Astartes had to respect. They would forever cement the Admiral as one of the greatest heroes the Imperium had ever known. Even so, Abaddon was a formidable foe with millennia of experience and the endless support of the Sea of Souls. The Gothic sector was now truly in a state of total war. Every man, woman and child was tasked to abandon their usual labour and dedicate themselves wholly to the war effort. Every single industrial complex, from titanic manufactoria to lowly corner shops, were ordered to toil in service of the Guard and Navy. The many fortress worlds of the sector were ordered to emulate mighty Cadia and hold the line at all costs. The Astra Militarum began massive recruitment campaigns, enlisting anyone able to hold a lasgun. The Red Priests of Mars triggered the sacred rites of war, shifting to full wartime production in the name of the machine god. What few Space Marine companies operated in the area pledged their unyielding support. Though few in number and unlikely to be reinforced, they would play a pivotal role in any Imperial defense. Mostly drawn from the Imperial Fists, White Consuls, Exorcists, Red Talons, and Angels of Redemption, they would set aside their transhuman pride and work closely with von Ravensburg. By the closing of the third year of the Gothic War, Abaddon had a knife pressed against the Imperium's throat. But legends are born in the darkest moments of doubt. From every single vessel of Battlefleet Gothic, shouts of defiance rang out against the unending darkness of the warp. Millions of mortal crewmen clutched their archaic weaponry tightly. Their hands may have trembled with fear, but not one of them would back down from this fight. They stared at certain death as the Eye of Terror vomited antediluvian horrors human minds could not comprehend. They may not have been fearless Astartes, but every one of them would die before failing their Emperor and their Lord Admiral. No matter what the War Master would throw at them, the Imperial Navy would answer back in kind. As long as they stood firm, the God Emperor of mankind would deliver them from plague and war, from the scourge of the Kraken and the blasphemy of the Fallen, from the begetting of demons and the curse of the mutant. The line would hold. To find out the fate of Battlefleet Gothic and its brave crew, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.